The sun was just beginning to rise over the hills of Jalisco. Golden light spilled across rows of sharp, blue agave plants stretching far into the horizon. The air smelled like dust and smoke and the sweet, earthy scent of fermenting hearts, piñas, the workers called them. Santiago stood alone in the field, machete in hand. His back was bent. His arms were strong, but his eyes were tired, like they'd seen too much and remembered even more. He swung the blade without speaking. Chop, chop, slice. Each motion had rhythm. Each cut was clean. But behind the movements, he was somewhere else entirely. In another life. 15 years ago, they called him El Perro, the dog. Not because he barked, but because he bit. Because he didn't ask questions. Because he cleaned up messes that others couldn't. Now he was just Santiago, just a worker in a dusty field. The workers didn't talk to him much. Some said he was strange. Others said he had blood on his hands. Santiago didn't blame them. The truth was, they were right. At the edge of the field stood Don Julio, the old man who ran the distillery. Still the first to arrive, Julio said with a dry smile. Santiago didn't answer. He just nodded and kept working. Don Julio knew better than to push. He had offered Santiago a job 5 years ago, no questions asked. Just work, bed, food. No talk of the past. They never spoke of why Santiago never smiled, or why he didn't drink, or why he lit a candle every year on the same day alone. That morning something felt different. The wind was colder than usual. The agave leaves rustled louder than they should. And when Santiago turned to wipe his brow, he saw it. Something sitting on the edge of the dirt path. A sugar skull, white, carefully painted. 2 black crosses for eyes. Red flower petals along the cheek. And tucked beneath it, a small silver pistol. Wrapped in a red cloth. Santiago's blood ran cold. He looked around. The fields were empty. No one had passed by. No footsteps in the dirt. He picked up the cloth with slow hands, unwrapped the gun. His fingers trembled. He knew this pistol. It had belonged to Ramiro, his old boss, the man he had once worked for, the man who had burned villages and buried secrets, the man Santiago had betrayed. He stared at the skull. It wasn't just a threat. It was a message. That night, Santiago didn't go back to the bunkhouse with the other workers. He walked into town instead, into the small, quiet heart of the village, where the dust never settled and secrets walked in daylight. He entered a tavern with peeling paint and old wooden doors. Inside, the only light came from a single flickering bulb and the soft orange glow of candles on a shelf, each one set beside a framed photograph of someone who had died. It was a shrine, one for the lost, for the forgotten, for those who died without peace. Behind the bar stood Rosa, mid-40s, eyes sharp as broken glass. She raised an eyebrow when she saw him. "You haven't been here in months," she said. Her voice was tired, but not unkind. "I found something," Santiago said quietly, "in the fields." She wiped her hands on a rag and waited. A sugar skull, and a pistol. Now she frowned. "That time of year again?" she asked.
Santiago nodded.
But this one, it wasn't a warning. It was personal. Rosa leaned against the counter. "They found you?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe someone wants me to believe they did." She looked at him for a long time. "Then leave, before the blood starts again." "I can't," Santiago said. "There's a boy." His name was Luca, 11, big eyes, messy hair. Always followed Santiago around like a shadow in the fields. He was one of the orphans that helped Don Julio clean bottles and sweep floors. Something about Luca reminded Santiago of him, of the child he couldn't save, of the boy whose name he hadn't spoken in years. Back at the distillery, the shadows grew longer. Santiago sat alone under the stars, watching the sugar skull on the table in front of him. He lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in years. He took one drag, then crushed it beneath his boot. He didn't like fire, not after what had happened. Flashback, 10 years ago, a village burning, screams in the night, men with masks, a little boy with blood on his shirt, crying in the corner of a church. Santiago standing there, gun in hand, frozen, and Ramiro's voice behind him, "Do it, or I will." But Santiago didn't pull the trigger. He couldn't. He dropped the gun and ran. The fire had never left him. Even now, in the cool night air, he could still smell the smoke. The next morning, Santiago went back to the fields. The workers were quiet, glancing at him when they thought he wasn't looking. Then he heard the whispers. Someone had been asking questions in the village. Someone with scars. A deep voice. A limp. His heart began to pound. Ramiro was dead. He had to be. But there were others. Men who remembered. Men who wanted revenge. At the edge of the field, Luca ran up to him. "Mr. Santiago," the boy shouted, holding out a wooden carving. "Look, I made this." It was rough and crooked. A little wooden dog. Santiago stared at it. A dog.
El perro.
He knelt down, took the carving with gentle hands. "Thank you," he said softly. "Luca beamed. I'm gonna be strong like you someday." Santiago's face didn't change, but inside something cracked. That night he didn't sleep. He sat outside his shack, the pistol resting on his lap. He was being watched. He could feel it. Somewhere in the hills, eyes were waiting, and soon the past would come knocking. He thought about running, but this time he had someone to protect. And Santiago knew one thing for certain: the dead don't forget, and neither did he. The skull didn't move. It just sat there on Santiago's table, blank eyes staring back at him. The pistol beside it hadn't rusted, even though it looked like it belonged in another lifetime. Santiago hadn't touched either since he brought them home. They didn't need to be loaded. They were already heavy with memory. That morning, before the sun rose, he went to Rosa's tavern again. Not for a drink, for silence. The kind only fear could stir between two people who had seen too much and survived too little. Rosa poured him black coffee and leaned on the bar with folded arms. "They were here last night," she said softly. "Who?" "3 men. Didn't give names. Didn't need to." Santiago kept his eyes on the steam rising from the cup. "They asked if El Perro still breathed," she added. He said nothing. "They'll be back tonight." Santiago stared out the window. The streets were empty. Jalisco hadn't woken yet, but he could feel it, the way the dust didn't settle. The way dogs barked too long into the night. The way silence wrapped around the village like smoke. "They know I'm here," he said quietly. "You need to run." He shook his head. "I did that before." Rosa's voice was sharper now. "They don't just want to kill you. They want to remind people what happens to traitors. And they'll hurt others to do it." The memory of fire flickered behind his eyes. The boy crying in the church. The child with blood on his shirt. The pistol Santiago couldn't lift. He clenched his jaw. Not this time. Later that day, he returned to the distillery. Don Julio was walking the rows of agave, giving quiet orders to workers with dusty boots and sunburned faces. When he saw Santiago, his expression grew grim. "I heard things," Julio said. "Men in dark cars, asking questions with money in their hands."
Santiago nodded.
"They're looking for me." Julio scratched his beard. "I gave you work because I believed in second chances. But this village isn't built to carry your past. I never meant for it to follow me," Santiago said.
Julio sighed.
"Doesn't matter what we mean. Only matters what we leave behind." Inside the small bottling shed, Luca was lining empty glass bottles on a wooden shelf. When he saw Santiago, his face lit up. "I saved one for you," he said, holding up a tiny blue bottle with a crooked cork. Santiago managed a small smile.
Gracias.
Luca climbed onto a crate, proud. "Did you see the dog I made? Carved a new one. This one has a name, Pancho." Santiago took the carving gently. It was rough, splintered, but full of heart. "You're good at this," he said. Luca shrugged. "I like fixing broken things." Santiago's smile faded. So did he. That night, the sky was darker than usual. Storm clouds rolled in from the mountains. No stars. just the sound of thunder far off, like boots marching across the sky. Santiago stayed awake, seated by the window. The pistol lay on the table, the skull beside it. A candle flickered, the wax melted slowly, and Santiago waited. Just after midnight, he saw them. 3 figures, moving like shadows across the field. 1 by the road, 2 behind the storage barn. They didn't knock. They didn't need to. Santiago stood and picked up the pistol. Felt heavier than it should have, like it remembered what he had done. He stepped outside, quiet, barefoot, no sound. The 3 men didn't see him at first. He watched them from the side of the house, breathing slowly. Then, one of them stepped into the moonlight. Santiago's chest tightened. He recognized the scar across the man's jaw. Tomas, once Ramiro's right hand, now older but just as cruel. Tomas turned suddenly, sensing movement. "Pero," he called into the night. "You still bite, or just whimper?" Santiago stepped into the open, pistol lowered. "Leave," Tomas laughed. "You think hiding in a field makes you clean? I'm not that man anymore. Maybe not. But he left messes we came to finish." Santiago's voice dropped. "There are children here." Tomas' eyes narrowed. "We know. One of them reminds us of a mistake." The air snapped. That wasn't just a threat. It was a message. They knew about Luca. Before Santiago could react, one of the men raised his weapon. Gunfire cracked. Santiago ducked, rolled behind the shed. With splintered, he fired once. Hit nothing, but he wasn't aiming to kill. Not yet. From the house, a light flicked on. It was Don Julio, and behind him, Luca, blinking in confusion, still half asleep. Santiago shouted, "Back inside! Lock the door!" But Luca didn't move. The second man ran toward the house. Santiago moved on instinct. He fired. The shot echoed through the hills. The man dropped. Silence. Tomas cursed and vanished into the darkness. The third man followed. Gone. Santiago stood in the field, chest heaving. Luca ran toward him. "You're bleeding!" the boy cried, pointing to Santiago's arm. A bullet had grazed him. He hadn't even noticed. "I'm okay," Santiago said, kneeling. Luca clung to him, shaking. "You said you don't hurt people anymore." "I try not to," Santiago whispered. "But sometimes monsters come back." By sunrise, the police had come, not because someone called, but because Rosa had seen the flash of gunfire and went running through the night to find help. The bodies were gone. Tomas and the other man had dragged their dead companion away, but blood stained the dirt, and the message was clear. This was just the beginning. Don Julio patched Santiago's wound inside the distillery's office. "You brought a war here," the old man said. "I didn't ask for it." "No, but you're going to finish it, aren't you?" Santiago nodded. "I have to." Julio lit a cigar and handed him a folded envelope. "What's this?" Santiago asked. "Something I kept in case the past came back." Inside the envelope, a name, a town, and a photograph. The man in the photo looked familiar. It was Mateo, Ramiro's younger brother. Rumor was Mateo had disappeared after Ramiro's death. But now he was back, and he wanted Santiago to remember. That night, Santiago took the sugar skull and placed it in front of a candle. He stared into its eyes. "You should have left me buried," he whispered. The flame danced. Outside, thunder rumbled again. But Santiago didn't flinch. He was done hiding. The road to Santa Esperanza hadn't changed. Dust still clung to the hills. The crows still circled over the dying trees. And the silence. It was the same silence that had blanketed bodies in the old cartel wars. Santiago hadn't been here in a decade, and he had hoped he'd never return. He left at dawn, just after Luca had fallen asleep again. Rosa gave him a knife, wrapped in old cloth. "You don't need to win," she said. "Just come back alive." Don Julio didn't speak. He simply handed Santiago the keys to the old black truck that still smelled of agave and oil. Santiago didn't ask why. The old man had seen enough war to know when one was brewing again. As the truck rattled through empty roads and mountain turns, Santiago kept the photograph in his pocket. Mateo, Ramiro's younger brother, quieter, colder, but no less dangerous. He hadn't been part of the bloodshed directly. Mateo stayed in the shadows. He handled the ledgers, the shipments, the bribes. And now, somehow, he was the one who wanted Santiago dead. Why now? What had changed? Santa Esperanza was a ghost town. Half the buildings were boarded up. Others had bullet holes where windows should be. Only a handful of people still lived there, the brave or the forgotten. Santiago parked the truck near the old train station and walked down the narrow alleyways on foot. He passed a burned-out chapel, a broken statue of Saint Michael. Then he saw him, Mateo, standing beneath the cracked arch of the old town hall. Hands folded, suit too clean for a place this dirty. He looked exactly like his brother, but thinner, sharper, and with dead eyes that never blinked. "I knew you'd come," Mateo said. Santiago didn't stop walking. "You left a body in Jalisco," Santiago said. "You wanted me to find it." Mateo gave a thin smile. He was one of Ramiro's men, loyal even after death. "You could have sent a letter. This is more personal." They stood a few feet apart. The dust blew between them like old ghosts rising. "I didn't kill Ramiro," Santiago said. "You didn't have to," Mateo replied. "You just let him burn." Santiago's voice was low. "He lit the fire, and you walked away." Mateo pulled a cigarette from his jacket, lit it with a match that hissed against the wind. "Did you know?" he said. "My brother cried before he died?" Santiago didn't move. "He cried because you betrayed him, because you spared the boy." "The boy?" Santiago's stomach turned. Mateo stepped closer. "I want him." "Who?" "The boy. Your boy." Santiago's blood ran cold. "You think I'd let you near him?" "He's not yours, Santiago," Mateo said, voice soft now. "He's Ramiro's." The world stopped. The wind, the dust, even Santiago's breath. "What did you say?" Mateo exhaled smoke slowly. "Ramiro had a son, born to one of the village girls, hidden away during the wars. Your boy, Luca. That's him." Santiago staggered back a step. "No, do the math," Mateo said. "The age, the eyes, the stubbornness. You thought it was coincidence." The memory slammed into Santiago. The night of fire, the church, the crying boy in the corner, covered in blood. He hadn't asked who the child was. He just saved him. He thought it was redemption. Now it was a curse. "You want revenge?" Santiago said, shaking. "You want to punish me?" "I want blood," Mateo said. "Not yours. His." Santiago drew his pistol, but Mateo didn't flinch. "You won't kill me," Mateo said, "because if you do, my men go to the village. And they won't stop at Luca." Santiago's hand trembled. The line between past and present was disappearing. He had killed men, betrayed a cartel, saved a child without knowing the cost. Now it was all circling back. Mateo flicked his cigarette into the dirt. "You have 3 days. Bring me the boy." "I won't." "Then bury more than just memories." He turned and walked away, vanishing behind the broken church wall. Santiago stood alone. The wind picked up. The sky darkened. By nightfall, Santiago was back in the truck. He didn't drive straight home. He parked on the edge of an overlook, where the hills of Jalisco rolled out like waves beneath the stars. He sat there, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Luca, the boy he raised, the boy who trusted him. Was he really Ramiro's son? Was this whole thing just a loop Santiago had never escaped? Back in Jalisco, the fields were quiet, but Rosa wasn't sleeping. She stood at the edge of the agave rows, torch in hand. She had seen signs, footprints that didn't belong, shadows where there should have been none. When Santiago finally returned, she met him at the gate. "You saw him," she said. He nodded. "He wants the boy." She stared at him, searching his face. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." Luca was asleep in the shed again, curled up with his wooden dog carving beside him. Santiago sat beside the boy for a long time. He didn't sleep. He watched the candlelight flicker against the old glass window and thought about how strange fate was. He had tried to escape fire, but it had followed him, because it lived inside him, too. The next morning, he met Don Julio by the distillery. Julio was already cleaning an old shotgun. "You heard?" Santiago asked. "I heard enough."
Santiago stepped closer.
"He says the boy is Ramiro's."
Julio paused.
"Do you believe him?" "I don't know what to believe anymore." Julio handed him a map. It marked a trail through the mountains, an old smuggler's path once used by the cartel. "You can take him away," Julio said. "Far enough that even ghosts can't follow." Santiago stared at the map. "I don't run," he said softly. "Sometimes survival is fighting. Sometimes it's leaving before the sky falls." But Santiago couldn't decide. Was he trying to be a father, a savior, or just a man running from what he used to be? 3 days, that's all he had. And somewhere in those 72 hours, he had to choose between burying the past or letting it bury him. That night, Luca found Santiago by the fire pit. "Are we in trouble?" the boy asked. Santiago looked at him. He saw Ramiro's eyes, but not Ramiro's heart. "No," he said, "we're in a story, but we get to write the ending." On the morning of the third day, the skies over Jalisco turned gray. Not the kind of gray that brought rain, the kind that warned of something worse. Santiago stood outside the house, pistol holstered, eyes scanning the horizon. Rosa came to his side, her voice low. They were spotted. 2 black trucks took the old road by the river. Santiago didn't flinch. "They'll be here by nightfall." Inside the shed, Luca packed the few things he owned into a small bag. Wooden dog carving, his blue tequila bottle, a torn drawing of him and Santiago smiling under a mango tree. He didn't ask questions. He just knew. Something was coming. Santiago stepped in, crouching beside him. "You remember that trail Don Julio told us about?" Luca nodded. "You're going to take it. Tonight." Luca's face tightened. "Alone?" Santiago shook his head. "Rosa's going with you. She knows the way." Luca looked down at the carving. "What about you?" Santiago didn't answer, because if he did, the lie would show in his voice. Back at the distillery, Don Julio placed 3 bottles of old tequila into a crate. Santiago arrived, jaw tight. Julio turned slowly. "I heard. They'll come for the boy. They'll come for you. The boy is the story they're using." Santiago stepped forward. "I want them here. I want them looking at me."
Julio sighed.
"So this is how it ends?"
Santiago nodded.
No more running. By afternoon, the field was silent. No workers.
No deliveries.
No sound but the wind through the agave leaves. Santiago set traps along the entrance. Broken glass.
Fishing wire.
He wasn't a soldier, but death had taught him how to think like one. That night, just before dusk, Rosa hugged Santiago tightly. "You sure about this?" He nodded. "Keep him safe. He'll ask for you."
Santiago swallowed.
"Tell him I'll be there, even if I'm not." Luca tried not to cry as they slipped into the shadows of the trail. He looked back once. Santiago was still there, standing at the gate, watching. By the time the sun disappeared, the trucks had arrived. 2 of them, matte black, dust on the tires. Windows tinted too dark to see inside. Santiago didn't hide. He stood in front of the distillery, arms crossed, pistol at his side. The doors opened. 3 men stepped out. And then Mateo, still clean, still composed, like death didn't touch him. "No boy?" Mateo asked, voice calm. "He's gone," Santiago said. "Out of reach." Mateo tilted his head. "You think I won't find him? I think you won't make it out of here." A pause. Then Mateo laughed. "You always were more brave than smart." Behind him, one of the men cocked a rifle. Santiago raised the pistol slowly. Mateo held up a hand. Let him speak. Santiago took a step forward. I didn't kill Ramiro, but I did walk away, because I knew what he was becoming. Don't you speak about him. I loved him once, Santiago said, voice trembling, like a brother. Before the blood, before the greed. Mateo's face darkened. You betrayed him. I saved his son. The men behind Mateo stiffened. Mateo looked like he'd been slapped. I saved the only good thing he ever made, Santiago continued. And you want to kill that? You think that'll bring peace? Mateo stepped forward now, face twitching. He is a symbol of weakness. He is proof that our legacy failed, and failure must burn. Santiago didn't hesitate. He raised the pistol and fired. The shot hit the ground inches from Mateo's foot. Chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked through the night. Santiago dove behind a barrel, returning fire. Glass shattered. Bullets tore through wood. One of Mateo's men screamed, hit in the chest. Another was dragged back to cover, bleeding from the leg. But Santiago wasn't aiming to kill all of them. He had a plan, and he only needed time. As the men regrouped, Santiago lit a match and threw it behind him, into the open crate of tequila bottles soaked with kerosene. The fire exploded, lighting the night sky with orange fury. Flames danced across the field. Smoke curled into the heavens. The agave burned like paper. Mateo stumbled back, choking on smoke. You would destroy everything just to win? He yelled. No, Santiago said, stepping through the flames. I destroy it so you lose. They fought in the firelight, not with guns, with fists, with memory. Santiago tackled Mateo, both crashing into the dirt. Mateo struck first, cutting Santiago's cheek with his ring. Santiago returned with a punch that cracked something. They rolled, kicking up dust and ash. Finally, Santiago pinned him. Mateo gasped, coughing. This won't end, he snarled. He'll never be free. Santiago raised his fist, and then stopped. He looked into Mateo's eyes, dead, like Ramiro's at the end. He stood. Mateo didn't rise. He just lay there, bleeding. You won't kill me? He hissed. No, Santiago said. You'll live, and you'll carry this shame forever. Sirens. In the distance, Rosa had called the police. The real ones this time, not bought. Santiago limped away from the fire. When the officers arrived, Santiago dropped the pistol and raised his hands. Mateo screamed after him from the ground. This isn't over. You'll always be one of us. Santiago looked back. No, he said. I buried him. The fire was put out by dawn. Half the field was gone, but the distillery stood. So did Santiago. Days later, in a quiet village far from Jalisco, Rosa and Luca waited in a one-room house with blue shutters. Luca carved a new dog, this one taller with stronger legs. Rosa handed him a letter. Luca opened it. Inside, Santiago had written, You are not your father's sins. You are not my ghost. You are the only good thing I ever held on to. Keep carving. Keep walking. And remember, the fire didn't end you. It forged you. Luca stared at the letter a long time. Then he smiled. Just a little. The kind of smile that knew grief, but chose hope. 2 years later, the agave fields had grown back. Not as tall, not as wild, but new. That was the thing about Jalisco. It knew how to survive, even when everything burned. In a small home behind the rebuilt distillery, Don Julio sat on a rocking chair, pouring tequila into 2 glasses. One he placed beside him, untouched. The other he sipped. A small photograph of Santiago rested on the table. Not the kind taken in youth or vanity. This one showed him laughing, arms around a boy with big eyes and carved wooden animals in his hands. Santiago hadn't died that night. He had disappeared. After the fire, after the police came, he gave one final statement, then vanished from the village.
No grave. No goodbye.
Just wind and smoke and silence. Some say he ran to the north. Some say he joined the monks in Sonora. Julio never believed any of that. He believed something else, that Santiago had finally walked into the part of himself that wasn't haunted. Luca, now older, wore a leather apron and moved through the new distillery like he belonged there. Because he did. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was 15, and he knew what fire did to the ones who let it rule them. He also knew what it meant to survive it. Every morning he carved before sunrise. Dogs, wolves, sometimes people. One of the carvings sat in a dusty corner of the shed. It was a man holding a child in one hand and fire in the other. One day, as the sun reached high over the hills, a stranger came to the village. Tall, gray hair beneath a broad hat. He walked slowly, limping slightly, and when he arrived at the distillery gates, Luca looked up. He froze, then smiled, and ran. They didn't speak at first, just held each other, and when the words finally came, they came slow and cracked, like old leather. "You came back," Luca whispered. "I promised," Santiago said. The village didn't know what to make of it. Santiago looked older, thinner, but his eyes were calm. Not like before. No more ghosts behind them, just quiet. That night, they sat by the fire outside the house. Rosa poured mezcal, older now too, but still with that same fire in her eyes. Don Julio joined, nodding as he poured. "You always did know how to ruin a perfect ending," he muttered to Santiago.
Santiago smiled.
There was never a perfect one. Luca watched them. This wasn't the same man who had raised him in a shed. This Santiago didn't flinch at every echo, didn't stare off into nothing. This one laughed more, even if it was quieter. Later that evening, Santiago walked into the fields. The agave leaves whispered like they remembered him. He knelt and touched the earth. "I tried to bury you," he whispered. "Ramiro, Mateo, the man I was." The wind stirred, as if replying. "But maybe we don't bury the past." He looked up at the stars. "Maybe we carry it, until it doesn't hurt." Back in the house, Luca had a question burning in him. "Was it true?" he asked. "What Mateo said?" Santiago turned slowly. "That I'm Ramiro's son?" The silence stretched. Santiago nodded once. "Yes." Luca didn't cry. He just looked down at his carving. "And you still saved me?" Santiago knelt beside him. "You weren't him, not for 1 second. But I have his blood. So do I. On my hands." Luca looked at him again. "Are we cursed?" Santiago shook his head.
No.
"We were born in fire, but fire's not a curse. It's just heat. Destruction. And sometimes rebirth." Luca nodded, then smiled. Just a little. That week, Santiago helped him rebuild the fence. He taught him how to handle a pistol, not to use it but to respect it. He told stories about the old days. Not all of them bloody. Some were just about mango trees, and stolen tequila, and laughter that echoed in the desert. And when the time came for Santiago to leave again, because he always left, he gave Luca a final gift. It wasn't gold, or weapons, or even advice. It was a carving, rough, cracked, carved from an old tequila barrel. A man, standing tall, holding a torch. Underneath, one word burned into the base: forgiven. Luca placed it on the altar that Rosa kept near the door, next to the Virgin, next to the candle that never went out, next to the space they saved for the dead, and the ones who came back. A year later, tourists returned to Jalisco. The tequila from that village won awards. People said it had a strange taste, smoky, sharp, but warm like memory. They called it El Hijo del Fuego, the son of fire. No one really knew what happened to Santiago. Some said he opened a cantina by the coast. Others said he died quietly under a fig tree, carving until the end. But Luca knew. He hadn't died. He had just burned the last bridge between who he was and who he wanted to be. And in that field, where agave still swayed with the wind, a new boy carved his future from old wood. A boy whose blood came from violence, but whose life came from choice.